UK elections, riots, and protests in the UK, and could we see developments like this in Sweden? Welcome to Riks Europe, Paul Embery, trade unionist and writer.
Thank you.
You have a Substack and you've written a lot about what's happening in the UK at the moment, but could you start off by giving us an update on these riots, protests, demonstrations? How is it all developing?
Well, it's still ongoing at the moment, and there's talk as we speak now of further protests taking place today and this evening, and possibly over the coming days. So it's a really unpleasant situation. The trigger, if you like, for the protest was the awful events in Southport in northwest England, where 3 young girls were stabbed to death, and that gave rise to a protest there in Southport about the need to protect children, and about the issue of crime. But I have to say, I think most analysts recognise that the issues, the underlying issues, are much wider than just the event that happened in Southport. There's been a kind of simmering tension in this country, I think, for several years now, over the issue of immigration and the lack of regulation and proper control over what some people see as an increasing kind of lawlessness on our streets. And even economic insecurity and injustice, all of these things are playing into it, and that has led to some of the very nasty and toxic scenes that we're seeing on our streets at the moment. I hope it goes away very soon, but I don't know whether it will.
And alternative media, they speak about a double standard with the media and the way they report about these happenings. Do you agree that there is a sort of a double standard, or that they don't address the symptoms of the cause for the rage and the riots, and even if you can't condone violence and that sort of behavior?
I think there's a perception among many people, not entirely unjustified, I have to say, that the police and the authorities take a different approach to disorder, to protests, according to which particular group is protesting, and what their objective is. The example that a lot of people have used is the Black Lives Matter protests that we had in London and elsewhere throughout the country a couple of years or so ago. And the response of the authorities to those protests, which in some cases were pretty violent, actually. Police officers were injured, there was destruction of property and so on. The response to that was softer, I think it's fair to say, and more nuanced than the response we've seen in respect of some of the more recent bout of violence. To give you an example, Keir Starmer, who during the Black Lives Matter protest was the leader of the Labour Party, the leader of the opposition, took the knee 2 days after some really serious violence and disorder, took the knee in support of the cause of the BLM campaign. And I think generally people do feel that there's a sense. I think some of the criticism has been unfair, actually, and the police have it really difficult. We should say that. But there are examples, I think, of where there has been two-tier policing, and that's what makes people angry. And to answer the other part of your question, I don't think the political class in our country at the moment have the slightest clue how to deal with these issues. And in fact, I think much of it just isn't actually addressing the issue head on at all. So we'll see politicians talking about Elon Musk and how he is allegedly fueling the flames of the disorder on Twitter. They'll talk about Tommy Robinson, who's a kind of nationalist activist in the UK, and the need to kind of clamp down on him and to stop his social media activity. They'll talk about disinformation from hostile foreign powers. And all of this misses the point, actually, because the reality is that this resentment and these tensions have been brewing for a very, very long time. And the majority of it is simply through the lack of regulation over immigration and the impact that that's had in the country. And until politicians get to grips with that, and they get to grips with the fact that people do feel that social solidarity is diminishing. They do feel that increasingly some of our towns and cities are living in these kind of cultural silos, and that there is a real issue around bringing people together within one civic identity, and the fact that we are now a more fragmented and atomized community. Until politicians start dealing head on with some of those tough questions, I don't think the resentment's going to go anywhere.
And you also wrote about Sweden and the current situation here. And if you wrote, everybody knows the cause of Sweden's current misfortune. Could you tell us more about your thoughts?
Yeah, and it's something I've been following closely now for a couple of years, and of course you will know more about the situation than I do naturally, but certainly looking at the situation from Britain and reading about the situation from Britain, I think I think first of all it's a really sad story, because I think Sweden was and still is in many ways a country that many of us admire and we look to as an example. It was a poster boy for social democratic politics, which are largely sort of my type of politics. And I think it's fair to say that the country has been altered and been going through a period of real deep political turbulence as a result of the impact of high levels of immigration and what that's done in terms of unity and how it's fragmented what was previously, a high trust society where there was deep reservoirs of social solidarity, and some of that unity appears to me to have been broken up, and you've got real issues around gang crime. I think I'm correct in saying that the second highest rate of gun deaths now in Europe. And I think in many respects it's a lesson for how things can go wrong when politicians fail to get a grip of these issues. And I think it's something that we and other countries should be looking at and saying, this shows us why we need to take this issue seriously, because it's not the kind of path that we want to travel along as well.
Thank you, Paul Embery, trade unionist and writer, for giving your insights.
You're welcome.
And thank you for watching Riks Europe.